I grew up in a small town in the Free State, and for most of my childhood, my grandmother had one rule that I thought was completely ridiculous. If you heard someone calling your name from outside the house after midnight, you were not allowed to answer. It didn't matter who you thought it was. My grandmother used to say, if they need you, they'll come to the door. Whenever I asked her what she meant, she would just tell me that some things knew your name. I never really believed her. That changed when I was 23. At the time, I was working in Bloemfontein and occasionally drove back to my grandmother's house on weekends. She lived about an hour outside the city in a small farming community where most of the houses were separated by empty fields. One Friday evening, I arrived later than usual. It was already after 10. My grandmother was sitting in the lounge watching television and my younger cousin was asleep in the spare bedroom. As soon as I walked inside, my grandmother looked at me strangely. Why are you so late? Work? She nodded. Then she locked the front door. I remember joking about it. Are you expecting someone? She didn't laugh. Don't open the door tonight. I thought she was talking about thieves. Why? She looked toward the hallway. Just don't. That was it. Around midnight, everyone went to bed. I was lying in the spare room scrolling through my phone when I heard something outside. Knock. I stopped scrolling. A few seconds later, knock, knock, 3 knocks. I sat up. At first, I assumed it was my cousin playing around. Then I heard a woman's voice. Tabiso. It was my grandmother. I got out of bed. Gogo. There was silence. I opened my bedroom door. The passage was completely dark. Then I heard it again. Tabiso. This time the voice sounded like it was coming from the front door. I started walking toward it. I was about halfway down the passage when I remembered what my grandmother had said. Don't open the door. So I stopped. Gogo. Nothing. Then something knocked on the front door again. Knock, knock, knock. I walked back to my room. A few seconds later, my grandmother shouted from her bedroom. Tabiso. I nearly answered. Then she shouted again. Tabiso, don't come outside. I froze because I suddenly realized something. My grandmother's bedroom was on the other side of the house. She couldn't possibly have heard the knocking. And she couldn't possibly have known that I was standing in the passage. I went back into my room and closed the door. For the next 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps. They started at the front door, slowly, one step at a time, across the veranda, then along the side of the house. Then they stopped directly outside my bedroom window. I could hear something breathing. I didn't move. My phone was in my hand. I thought about calling the police. Then my phone vibrated. A WhatsApp message from my grandmother. Don't look outside. I stared at the message. My grandmother was in the next room. I typed Gogo. The message showed one tick. Then another message came through. Whatever you hear, don't answer it. I heard something scratch against my window. 3 slow scratches. Then a voice whispered, Tabiso. I covered my mouth. The voice sounded exactly like my grandmother. Tabiso, please open the window. I didn't answer. I'm cold. Silence. Then, please. I stayed completely still. A few seconds later, the voice changed. It became my cousin. Tabiso, open the door. Then my mother's voice. Then my father's. People who weren't even in the house. It kept calling me. Different voices. Different people. All asking me to come outside. Then suddenly it stopped. I didn't sleep that night. At around 5 in the morning, I heard my grandmother walking down the passage. She opened my door. Her face looked exhausted. She sat on the edge of my bed. You heard it? I nodded. She didn't ask what I heard. Instead, she said something that I still think about. My mother used to tell me that there are things that live close to people. She looked toward the window. "They learn your voice." I asked her what it was. She didn't answer. Instead, she told me to wait until sunrise before opening any doors. When the sun finally came up, we went outside together. There were footprints around the house. Not animal footprints, not human footprints either. They were small, much smaller than mine. They circled the house several times, but the strangest thing was the window of my bedroom. There were scratches in the dust beneath it. 3 long marks. My grandmother saw them. She immediately went back inside. I asked her what she thought had made them. She said, "Don't ask questions about things that don't want to be seen." I left that morning. I never slept in that house again. A few months later, my grandmother passed away. Before the funeral, I went back to collect some of my belongings. The house had been empty for several weeks. I was packing my things when I heard something outside. Knock. I stopped. Knock. My heart started racing. Then knock. 3 times. I stood there staring at the front door, and then I heard my grandmother's voice from outside, very quietly. "Thabiso." I didn't move. She said my name again. "Thabiso, open the door." I stood there for almost a minute, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold. A second voice whispered from behind me, "Don't." I turned around. There was nobody there. I ran out of the house without taking the rest of my belongings. I haven't gone back since. And to this day, whenever someone calls my name from outside after midnight, I don't answer. Because my grandmother was right about one thing. If someone really needs you, they'll come to the door.